A major not guilty verdict in the case of a January 6er, somebody named Matthew Martin, who flew into D.C. from New Mexico, got charged with a whole slew of crimes, said, I'm not pleading to anything, took his case to trial, and won. A federal judge came out, acquits this guy named Matthew Martin of all charges. You can see here that he said that there was a big problem with the election. He went to trial on April 6th. Ryan Riley over from NBC News gives us an update, and we're going to go through the story. We're going to take a look at some of the exhibits that were used by Matthew Martin and his defense team. We're going to listen to them and see what their reaction was to this gigantic victory. Obviously a gigantic victory because this is, I believe, the very first acquittal coming out of the January 6th, beating a dead horse into the ground prosecution campaign. So let's go to the story before we dive into some of the details. NBC News telling us that this fella was a federal defense contractor. He even had top secret security clearance, and he even admitted he entered the Capitol building. No question about it. Somebody with top level security clearance. He's a federal defense contractor. Presumably he knows better that you're not supposed to go into the congressional building when you're not supposed to. And he even admitted he did it. Still not guilty at trial. Whoa. Matthew Martin was acquitted by U.S. District Court Judge Trevor McFadden after a 2-day bench trial. And we're going to talk about the difference between a bench trial and a jury trial because they are pretty big, but we'll let his attorney detail that in a minute. It says here, though, Martin, the defendant, the man charged, chose to go to trial in the misdemeanor case before a judge rather than before a D.C. jury. Martin was the first J6 defendant, as we see here, to be fully acquitted at trial. Wow. And told reporters after the verdict that he hopes to get his job back. You think that's going to happen? I doubt it. Martin, we see here, chose to go with a bench trial. And this requires permission and sort of approval from the prosecutor. So it's not like he just got to go in there and just exercise it. I'm going to show you a document that has both of their signatures. And the big reason oftentimes that these things don't go forward as felony charges is because the prosecutors know they can't make their case if they move forward with a felony charge. That would require a full jury to be impaneled. They don't want to impanel a full jury for a case that they maybe can't win. And so they decide we're going to forego any of the felony prosecution. We're going to drop all of these things down into a misdemeanor, and that takes it out of a jury eligible category. And so they sort of all agree that it's in everybody's interest to drop these things down. And so if you hear anybody in the media or anybody in these articles saying, oh, well, he sort of was forum shopping, or he picked the judge, or this thing could have gone differently if it would have gone to a full jury. Don't forget, the prosecutors are signing off on this too. It's not like the defense just gets to go in there and just say, well, we just get to pick what kind of trial we have. There are a lot of conversations that happen around this, but let's check in with Mr. Martin and his defense attorney. They are going to be explaining their reaction. Of course, they're walking out of the courtroom. Tremendous victory, tremendous verdict. Major hats off to a fellow defense attorney out there who is celebrating today victoriously. Doesn't happen all the time. And this is a big, high profile case. And so it's something that he should be commended on, obviously. So congratulations to this team on a major victory. Let's listen to their reaction.
Well, I think the definitive factor was that Matt Martin did not break the law.
There you go. There you go.
And
what's the factor?
We had the benefit of a lot of video evidence, and the judge had a chance to see it.
A little bit of background noise, but he said that there was a lot of video evidence, and I'm going to show you the exhibits. We have the exhibit list that they used at trial, and there are a lot of videos. And so they just kind of went through one by one and played them. Judge received all the evidence, saw clearly, didn't break the law. And the defense attorney is saying very conveniently, yeah, it's helpful. Obviously, he's acquitted because he didn't break the law. Here's how the rest of that sounds.
And video evidence is the best evidence. And
it's true.
He did nothing wrong.
Did it make a difference you didn't see a jury in there? You just saw a judge?
See that? A little angry?
Well,
a little bit of an attitude there, wasn't there? You kind of got lucky on this one, right? A jury didn't get to hear this. And so you got to a judge. And so you kind of really didn't win fair and square, did you?
That can cut both ways, because if it's a jury trial, then all 12 have to convict somebody.
It needs to be unanimous.
Whereas if it's a bench trial, you just have one person. And so it can cut either way.
Right. And he's right about that, because when you're talking about presenting only to a judge, you've just got one person. If that judge is sold, you're kind of out of luck, says your client's guilty. There's no way that you're going to be able to sort of flip that and reverse that judge's opinion, because it's a judge. Judges make their decisions and they don't typically reverse them. They almost never reverse them because they're judges. They require sort of the higher level courts to reverse them. And there's a whole conversation we could have about that. But here, what this attorney is saying is there's a difference between a jury and a judge. With the jury now, oftentimes a defense lawyer is excited about a jury because you kind of only need one. You may lose 11 people in his example. They all might say that your client is guilty, but if you get the one person who just says, I really think there is some reasonable doubt there, that typically might work in your favor. And so when you just play it, sort of an odds number, the odds game, many people would say, yeah, I'd like to get 1 out of 12. I take those odds all day over 1 out of 1. With a judge, you got to be right and win 100% of the time. With a jury, you just got to get one person to say, I'm not so sure it exists. And so that's the point he's making. He's saying, listen, a judge could have gone the other way on this thing. And for those people who were saying that this judge is biased because he's a Trump appointee, it's true, but we're going to see what his record is with some of these other January 6 cases. Let's go back to the statement here.
Mr. Martin, what's your reaction to this verdict today?
I am very thankful for the judge's verdict, and I'm hoping to get my life back together, get my job back.
Me too.
Your job at Los Alamos.
It's another company, but yeah, basically same.
The judge did say it was more likely than not he thought that you knew you weren't allowed to enter the Capitol. I mean, someone looking at this from the outside thinks, hey, you've got a top-level secret security clearance, you're a federal contractor, you know the rules for federal buildings. What would you say to them?
I'd just refer you to testimony.
Yeah, that's what I'd say to you. Don't have anything much else to say other than, well, you heard the testimony. I refer you to the testimony, and it's pretty clear what happened there. So whatever your opinion is about me being a federal contractor, whether I knew or should have known, judge heard the evidence. Judge found me not guilty. Tremendous victory. Let's learn a little bit more about the judge. We see here this guy is named...
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Anything else?
Well, that's the end of that statement. This guy is McFadden. I got a photograph of him. He's a 2017 Trump appointee, former police officer in Fairfax County, Virginia. And so many people would look at that and say, okay, kind of a conservative law and order guy. He doesn't like to see a bunch of insurrectionists rampaging the Capitol building. And this judge also is not some sort of MAGA loving, free all the insurrectionists out there, because he convicted other people. Number one, he convicted Couy Griffin of the group Cowboys for Trump at a bench trial, same type of trial, convicted him, illegally entering the grounds of the Capitol, but acquitted him on a separate charge. So kind of split the baby on that one, right? That's half guilty, half not guilty. But last month ran a trial also out of his courtroom where a jury convicted Guy Reffitt of the felony charges in the first January 6th trial. So he's been presiding over several of these. One, we've got a not guilty. One, we've got, looks like a full guilty on all counts. And then on another one, we sort of split them. He convicted on some and acquitted on the others in another bench trial, following the same pattern that we're seeing out of these DC courts. If these are such heinous insurrection felonies that require all the heft of the U.S. government, all the millions of dollars, if not billions at this point, that are being spent and just funneled over to the FBI, the DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security. They are creating all sorts of new groups to go and focus now on domestic, homegrown, violent extremism and all that nonsense. All of that money, if it's all so horrendous that they're trying to battle back all these criminals from Trump's, cabal, well, why are they dropping these all to misdemeanors before they go to trial and allowing these things to just proceed as bench trials, as misdemeanors, so that if somebody does get convicted, that they just sort of get a misdemeanor penalty rather than, whatever the insurrection penalty that they want would be? It's a good question, but they're not doing it because reality doesn't support their arguments, doesn't support their allegations. If they move forward with these felonies, it's kind of shocking to me. I would imagine as a prosecutor, you're thinking, I'm in Washington, D.C. It's one of the most liberal places in the world. These people are going to convict every one of these people every single time. So wouldn't you want all of your cases to go forward in front of the jury, unless they're really, really weak? In this case, as we can see, they are. Even the judge who has convicted other people here is not buying their arguments. Let's go through and see what some of the testimony sounds like from NBC News. We see that Martin testified at his bench trial. So the defendant got up and took the stand. And oftentimes we don't recommend that. Actually, in fact, most of the time you don't, right? You can go to CLE's, continuing legal education, in basically any corner of the world. Defense lawyers will very regularly counsel you on not calling your client. There's very little that you can gain out of it in most situations. In some situations, you see it happens. You see people like Kyle Rittenhouse say, I am totally innocent here. I'm not going to sit there and not say anything. Kyle Rittenhouse took the stand on advice of counsel. They communicated to him that this was necessary in the state of Wisconsin, and they made a decision. Same type of argument must have happened here. They're talking to Martin about this. They're saying, look, this is what's going to happen. If you take the stand, he does anyways, because he is unequivocal, didn't break the law. He gets up, he tells the judge, and he's not now testifying to the jurors, because there is no jury. He's now communicating to Judge McFadden, says, look, I didn't see everything that was happening around me at the time of this Capitol attack. Even though the footage he filmed, which was played by the government, shows broken windows and alarm blaring when he entered the Capitol on the east side after rioters busted open the doors leading to the rotunda. So little bit of color added onto this argument. So sort of laying out what happened and then responding to it as though he's issuing a rebuttal argument, kind of, even though the footage. So he says what he testified to, and then I think he's inserting his own argument like he's playing prosecutor here. The author of this is what I mean. McFadden said that the first charge of entering and remaining in a restricted building was a close call. So the judge says, it's close on this one. But said, there is reasonable doubt as to whether Martin knew in his mind he was entering the restricted building, though he said it was, quote, more likely than not that Martin knew he wasn't supposed to go inside. So what's happening here? A lot of different language, a lot of different sort of legal terms that we're seeing bandied about. Reasonable doubt and more likely than not. These are two very key phrases that exist in the law. And we talk about the preponderance of the evidence and different standards like clear and convincing evidence and all these different standards. And I think on this channel, we've shown before the hierarchy, sort of the stair steps of the different standards or the different burdens of proof that different parties have to meet when they are trying to accomplish some legal objective. So in a criminal case, prosecutors want to convict somebody. And so in order to convict them, we say they have to show proof beyond a reasonable doubt. If they can't meet that threshold, if they can't provide enough evidence that convinces you that it's beyond a reasonable doubt, any doubt that's based in reason, if you can come up with something in there, that's enough. There's reasonable doubt there. And that means a prosecutor will not be successful on that charge. They have to get over that burden. And they got to get over that burden on every single element. So for example, in a trespass case, they got to show beyond a reasonable doubt that you sort of, crossed into a physical boundary, right? There was a trespass and there was some sort of conversation about you're not supposed to be there. And at every single one of those elements, a physical insertion into a place where you shouldn't have been, a knowing prohibition on your presence being there, each one of those are separate elements. They require separate burdens, and they both have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. So here what the judge is saying, when we take those different elements apart and we sort of examine them and explore them, he says, listen, going here, the knew that you shouldn't have been entering in a restricted building, he says, there's some evidence here. It's probably more likely than not that you knew. It's probably like 51% at least that you knew, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. I still have a little bit of doubt that's based in reason. If maybe, I can't say that it's like 80 or 90%. So because it meets that lower standard and because it's a very critical part of the government's case, they have to prove every single element of every allegation beyond a reasonable doubt. They failed on that one. He's saying, I just don't see it. Maybe there's a question about whether you knew you were entering a restricted building. And so that's a big question that we've spent a lot of time here talking about. We've seen evidence and videos and photographs and heard testimony from people saying that the police were sort of allowing them in, standing down, opening the doors in some cases. I've got video footage of that. And a lot of this video footage was critical in the acquittal in Mr. Martin's case. Let's take a look at some of the exhibits that he submitted into evidence. So we can see here that this was filed April 6, 2022. We got 4 pages of exhibits. I think I've consolidated down into 3, but we've got a number of them. These are all being submitted by the defendant And let's go 1 through 10. Take a quick look. Marked for ID, received into evidence. And who is the witness who's laying some of the foundation for it? Matthew Martin. The guy charged. He's just going to come in and talk about all these things. He was there. He's ready to get up there and take the stand and communicate all this. So what is he talking about? Number one, we've got a tweet from Donald Trump. Probably a lot of tweets on that day. Don't know which one specifically. Southwest airline ticket. He flew in there. A hat worn by Matthew Martin. I think it was a MAGA hat. A coat worn by Matthew Martin on J6. A COVID mask. All this being introduced into evidence. Same with the flag pole. Remember, we heard that there was a lot of allegations that these flagpoles were being used as spears and jousting officers to their deaths off the top of the Capitol. Okay, we see here they got the JW Marriott DC room service tickets as well from January 5th and January 7th. Didn't go anywhere. Went back to the hotel, ordered room service. JW Marriott summary of charges. Receipt for parking. Hopefully, no inappropriate charges on those receipts. Receipt for parking at the Albuquerque airport. Yeah, I wonder when that was for. Then we get some of the photos and the videos. We see here exhibits 11 through 20. We've got approaching the Capitol.mov video. We've got some witnesses. John Erickson talked about that one. We've got photos of bike racks between two snow fences, another bike rack photo, police line sign photo. And I'm sure all of these exhibits at some point will become public, but since the trial just happened, they're not. But we'll probably see those at some point. But we've probably seen a lot of these, to be fair, in general. The Eastside.mov video, Rotunda video, steps leading to the northeast corner of the Capitol, entrance photo on the Rotunda, Rotunda door.movie, Matthew Martin carrying a flag inside the Capitol building photo, and Martin's testifying to all of those. And then we see sort of the last page of exhibits. We get a timeline, we get text between Martin and Angelica, and then several videos all recorded by Matt Martin, all of them on January 6th. And so you can see, the strategy here is they're just calling Matt Martin. Matthew Martin, come in here and show us exactly what happened and exactly what you did. And this is a very interesting thing because we've heard from many people who were there on the day saying that what we're hearing, they say, and they said happened is not what actually happened. And people saying, well, you saw the video footage and you saw all of this and it's a monster and these are animals and these are atrocious insurrectionists wrecking America. Well, if that's the case, if Matthew Martin was one of those people, why did he just bring all of his own videos in that he recorded at 1:52, 2:23, 4:22 p.m., 3:19 p.m. and just say, you want to see what I was doing? Just watch the videos. And the only person that they're going to bring in to talk about it is Matthew Martin. So even the prosecutors are probably going, oh, great. What are we going to do about this? Now, judge comes out and says McFadden said it was, quote, not unreasonable for Martin to assume that the outnumbered officers were allowing protesters to enter the Capitol. Not unreasonable for him to assume that. Same argument we've made here many, many times. And we've got videos of that coming up here shortly, rewinding the clock, showing the Upper West Side terrorists where the police literally just stood down and let the entire crowd wander on in. And I don't mean like elbow their way in, wander on in, as we're going to see. The government did not show evidence, they say, of Martin crossing police lines that had been broken down by the mob before Martin arrived. All of that violent activity, remember, right? There was sort of that initial surge and that initial burst. But after that, there were people walking around the Capitol building. We've made fun of it many times. There was grandma going, this is crazy out here. Honey, what are you doing? It was like a joke. And then we saw the entire media just come crashing down upon themselves, saying the end of America because somebody put their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Give me a stinking break. Meanwhile, FBI, DHS, Capitol Hill Police, Metro PD, Sergeant at Arms for both chambers, the most secure building in the entire world, presumably, couldn't handle a few hundred protesters. Shocking. Now, not really, because it's our federal government. What else could you expect? But here are the videos I was talking about. The U.S. Capitol building. Remember we saw this many months ago, back in October of 2021. I looked it up. We talked about this. U.S. Capitol building, the Upper West Terrace interior view. We're going to take a look at several video camera details showing what happened at this location. And we've got two different cameras, one going this direction and one going the other direction, right here from the same location. Remember, we talked about this. This is what it looked like. I'm zoomed in a little bit. You can take a quick look up here and you can see the time, 2:42:07. Now, for about half an hour leading up to this, there's a lot of activity at this doorwell, and maybe not half an hour. For several minutes, there are video camera feeds from all over the Capitol building, obviously. This one caught my attention and yours because this was where the police literally stand down. So for 2 minutes, we see this type of activity in this clip. Now I'm going to let it play just a little bit. You can see, we got some pushing and shoving. Whoa. Things are getting a little bit tense over here, folks. It seems like they might just burst at the seam and come parading into the Capitol building, but that's not true. We even have somebody who's on the other side of the line who's sort of, not getting into this, just filming it. We have Officer 1 talking, Officer 2, Officer 3. There's an Officer 4 back here, and I believe this is another Officer 5, all on the Upper West Side terrace on the exterior of the Capitol. So the time code, you can see 242.44, slowly just ticking away. And this just goes on for several minutes. So let's sort of, you can't hear anything. They don't give us any audio, but this guy's pretty animated. He is arguing. You can see there is basically no pressure, right? Nobody is leaning on each other. It doesn't look like the front of a crowd at a mosh pit or anything like that. We saw a little bit of that at first, but then it stopped. There's plenty of distance. This is COVID era. So not quite the 6-foot CDC guideline social distancing, but that's okay. We're talking about an insurrection here. So presumably they don't care about the virus, but you can see having arguments, probably saying things like, I don't know, we're peaceful protesters. Let's say we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. We're peaceful protesters. Just let us in. We're just going to go and stand in the forum and just make our voices heard. This has happened other times in other Capitol buildings throughout the country. This is whatever, having conversations. Or maybe they're saying we want to go, hang Mike Pence or whatever. But if that's the case, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of concerned reactions from police, like, let us in or else. They're all just hanging out. In fact, they just opened up to let other people out, is what it looks like. Other people coming from a different direction. So 2 minutes of that and nothing happens. No violence, nothing at all. We just let that whole thing play. And there's a lot more of that before we started. Then we see what happens. Take a notice here, 2:43:59. We fast forward 2:44:15. So just about 20 seconds later is when this picks back up. And as I mentioned before, these are two cameras that are sort of in the same hallway. So this is all one same hallway, but one camera is looking towards the exterior, one camera is looking to the interior. So as people walk through this doorway, as these police officers, as you're going to see, literally stand down, you can see the start of this stand down. This officer has his arm on this other officer's shoulder, and he's going to tell him, hey, we're done here. Let's go. We're out. Then they tap all the officers on the shoulders and they all leave. As that happens, they will literally exit out this hallway, open up this door, and basically prop it open for the rest of the protesters as they walk through. And this is the exact same argument that the judge was saying. He was basically extrapolating this and saying it's very reasonable for somebody in your position, sir, to think that if you're at the end of this line, that everybody is walking in with permission, because as you're going to see, it's a wander into the Capitol building. They're just like taking a little leisurely stroll, like a parade. Here's what it looks like. So there they are. Hey, we're done here. Let them in. All right, backs up, taps the other guy on the shoulder. All right. They come walking in. You see these police officers, slow walking in. Nobody's rushing. There's no violence going on. Hands up, that guy has. That cop opens the door. That cop holds the door as the first protester walks through, and he stops and holds it open again a little bit longer. Okay? And now everybody is just meandering on into the building. We have no rampaging, no violence. So now you can see, right? If you're this person, if you're this lady who just walked in here at the end, or whoever these people are, you were out previously about 30 seconds ago out in the hall, outside, and you can't see or hear anything that's going on. They let it in, and you maybe presume, I guess we're going to go now be a part of this peaceful protest. We're now going to go stand inside the Capitol building, make our voice heard, object to what we think is erroneous that's happening here, and that's the end of the story. Sounds like there may be some basis to that. Maybe the prosecutor can't get beyond a reasonable doubt that a person wasn't thinking that way. Here we see prosecutor came out. Guy's name is Michael Romano. And he, on cross-examination, asked Mr. Martin, whether he told an official at the airport that January 6th was, quote, like a big block party. Martin said, yeah, he made that comment during an awkward conversation with an airport official about the security procedures he needed to go through at the airport. And he was referring only to what happened at the Trump rally that preceded the Capitol riot, which he said, quote, had a festive atmosphere. So this guy's so funny. We're going to see he's just doubling down on this. Basically, his position is, yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, the Trump speech was amazing. I loved it. Trump's out. It was great. I'm a big fan. Loved it. The riot part, not so much a fan of that. That wasn't all that great. But yeah, I mean, it was a festive atmosphere. We were all there rallying around America. We all saw what just happened and nobody was happy about it. And so we were all there in unison. It was very festive. Lovely. Martin tried to downplay what was happening around him when he went into the Capitol, saying that he didn't specifically remember hearing an alarm blaring when he entered the building. Martin said, I saw no violence, which neither did we in those videos we just saw, despite filming a tussle with police inside the rotunda and another rioter trying to smash out a window. So maybe, we've got different interpretations of violence. He said that he would stay away from the Capitol if he had to do January 6th over again, but said he had positive personal experiences outside of being charged. There you go. Listen, a lot of good people there. A lot of good people there. Not every single person who happened to be there is an insurrectionist. In fact, I don't know, only a couple have been charged with seditious conspiracy? Everybody else hasn't been. And most of their cases are being dropped to misdemeanors, and some of them are even being acquitted, not guilty. McFadden was talking about some of these conversations and some of these statements that came out of Martin, and he said, Martin's conduct was seen as minimal and not serious. And as some of the other cases he's seen, he said he thought Martin was largely credible, but he also believed that Martin, quote, shaded his testimony at some points, minimizing his actions. And I think that's sort of the criticism that the prosecutor was trying to bring up, kind of like this whole thing was like a big joke to him. And it kind of was. He said here, I enjoyed everything else. I mean, I enjoyed the rally, Martin said. It's hard for me to say I regret coming to Washington, D.C. Martin had a great time. The riot thing was a little bit difficult, a little bit challenging. He had to spend the last year and a half of his life facing criminal charges from overzealous prosecutors, people screaming from the rooftops that American insurrection was something that was almost our real near future, that we were living in a world where the American democracy had been taken out because of people like Martin. Fortunately, there is still a semblance of due process at the margins in this country. At certain areas, we can see judges will give cases a fair shake. Evidence will be presented in front of them. Apparently, we get a victory, a not guilty, an acquittal. Now, the question, of course, is what are the consequences of this going to be? Are the other cases going to maybe get better plea deals? Are other cases going to be dismissed? Are they going to drop more felonies into misdemeanors? Are they going to level things up, prosecute even harder so that they can go and sort of beat back this new narrative? Because remember, this narrative is not going to be useful for them. Remember after Donald Trump was suing everybody after the election, and they kept repeating that talking point that Trump has not won a single lawsuit. He hasn't won anything. No court of law has done this, that, or the other. Well, now we've got a court of law that has vindicated, acquitted, found not guilty one of the very people that they've been mislabeling a danger to democracy. They're recrafting an entire enforcement structure around allegations like this. Turned out to be completely false. Mr. Martin, not guilty. Tremendous victory for Mr. Martin, his defense team. Tremendous victory for other January 6th defendants and all defendants who are oftentimes facing an uphill battle, feeling and fearing that they're not getting any due process or a fair shake. You can see that it does still happen. So congratulations to Mr. Martin. Amazing. We'll continue to follow the January 6 cases. I hope you join us in that journey. Would love it if you subscribe before you got out of here, because I look forward to seeing you on the next one.